Redman, what stands out in your memory as the moment when you realised you were really interested in voice and particularly the spoken voice?
Well, that's sort of my origin story, I think. Basically, I was working in musical theatre in the West End, kind of fiddling around the fringe version, the fringe venues, and then sort of doing got a little West End transfer and that kind of stuff. And it was fine, but it wasn't what like my childhood dream had thought it was going to be. Turns out I hate working evenings. Who knew? Musical theatre was not for me. At some point, somebody was like, "Oh, we need an Irish voiceover, Northern Irish voiceover for this job. Come to the studio at this time. We'll give you £400." And I was like, "Well, that's like all of my wages for 1 week for an hour in the West End right now." So I tootled along, and I did this voiceover, and I was like, walking the walk, talking the talk, like pretending I was experienced. I'd never done a voiceover in my life, and I jumped in the booth and I did this voiceover, and I did it in like 10, 15 minutes. And the guy was like, "That was great." I was like, "Oh my God, was it? That was my first one." He was like, "Really?" It was a really nice moment where he's like, "Well, I wouldn't have noticed. You seem to really know what you're doing." And it was when I was in that booth, I had this like ping of, this feels nice. This feels where I'm supposed to be on the microphone. And the huge contrast to the musical theatre world was that nobody was going, "Oh, your voice is great, but you don't look quite right," or "You look great, but your voice doesn't quite match what we need right now." And I'd come across a lot of those kind of unfortunate timing kind of casting issues in musical theatre, where people were saying like, "Oh, in 10 years, 10, 15 years, you're going to be a really great character performer." And I'm like, I don't want to be great in 10 years. I want to be working now. But in the voiceover booth, it doesn't matter what I looked like. It was all about my voice. And I had this real moment of like, well, this is exciting. I can just be here, I can speak, and nobody cares what the hell I look like or how tall I am or any of that stuff. So that's when I was really intrigued by the idea of spoken voice and the potential that it really has as a performer and as a human and as a communication tool, ultimately what it means to us. So I went back to Central School of Speech and Drama, where I'd done musical theatre, and I did their MA Voice Studies course, and I was like, okay, this is it. This is what I want to do. So that was it, really.
Yeah, if only they told you on the course before, you're going to have to work your nights,
I
Nick.
know, right? I mean, I really should have noticed.
I love that. Actor Morgan Freeman is often referenced as someone who's got an extremely pleasing voice to listen to. And one of his fellow actors, I think, described it as the voice of God. So, who do you consider to have a really enjoyable voice to listen to and why?
Hmm. Oh gosh. Well, okay. Being Irish, I have quite a what's the word? I feckin' love Irish accents, like especially Southern Irish accents. I'm a big fan. So probably at the moment, I'm really vibing with like Cillian Murphy or Barry Keoghan or people like that. Proper hardcore like Southern Irish accents. That's an accent related thing probably more than anything. When it comes to vocal quality and what makes, a voice nice to listen to or otherwise, I'm a bit of a like, I get on my soapbox a wee bit because I appreciate that people are drawn to certain voices. But I'm a big believer that that's actually only because that's what the media and the world has decided is acceptable for us to hear. And people with other voices that potentially might be deemed as too high, too low, too vocal fry, too shrill, too squeaky, too whatever, are kind of shunned. And there's a lot of like voiceism. People make decisions on voices that can represent XYZ, whether it's the news or a company or a group of people. And then we listen to it and we go, yeah, no, that is a nice voice. Yeah, they sound really intelligent. Yeah, no, that voice makes me feel really happy. Yeah. And actually, there's a lot of other remarkable voices out there that don't get a chance to be heard. So I have to stay on the side of all of them, all voices. I love all of them. They all have a place. They're all intriguing and unique and different and authentic and real. And that's why I love spoken voice so much, because there are so many different vocal aesthetics. And I suppose part of my job, particularly with podcasting, it's very much about getting them out of this space that, well, I need to sound like Morgan Freeman to be a good podcaster, or I need to sound like Olivia Colman to be a good podcaster. It's actually not about that. It's about what you've got to say, who you're trying to impact, who you're trying to connect with. So My answer after all that waffle is every single voice in the world.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was reading an article on voices and how we interpret them and the psychology, I guess, behind them, and it was saying how slow speakers tend to be thought of as kinder and more friendly, and if a male's pitch rises when they speak, they could be deemed as untrustworthy, and how breathy voices are perceived as more desirable to because of the lower levels of aggression, I think it was. So, do you think that actually we don't need to think about that psychological interpretive element and just promote our authenticity then?
Yes. I mean, that's the answer to that. Like, I hate all those studies. I think they're damaging. I think they perpetuate archetypal ideals, archaic stereotypes that are unhelpful and that marginalize many different sections of society and people with many different voices. And I think they're really unhelpful and really damaging. It's that idea that, if BBC News says these voices are worthy of reading the news, then anybody else that steps up to read the news or say something about politics or whatever it is doesn't have an opinion that's worthy. It really angers me. And us as listeners, I think, as well, have a really important responsibility to listen in a way that is more generous and open and kind, and to constantly question these kinds of studies. Because the truth about a lot of these studies is it's all a load of fluff nonsense most of the time. It's like linking to something to be sold or linking to something about some particular political party, or there's always an agenda, right? So I think as listeners, our agenda has to be inclusivity. And if you've got somebody in your life who has a voice that, what's the word, potentially triggers one's misophonia, because we all have it. For me, it's when my husband eats the yogurt. I can't be in the same, I mean, divorce. I have to leave the room. When I hear him eat a yogurt, that sound just makes me go, ah. But I know some people have that with voices. But it's our job to question why. Why does that voice make the hair stand up on the back of my neck? Why does that voice make me feel a particular way? It's the same with accents. I used to coach accents a lot. And a lot of the stereotypes connected with accents are really damaging and really offensive. I'm a Northern Irish person. The amount of times I've been told I'm angry or aggressive when I'm just excited and like passionate about something. The amount of times I'm told on a voiceover session to stop going up at the end of my sentences. And I'm like, you asked for a Northern Irish accent. This is our accent. Oh, but going up at the end makes you sound unsure and makes you sound, it's like, we've always got to question it, and have our own unbiased opinion of the sound that's going into our ears and allow it to settle, because sometimes it's just about a lack of exposure to these accents.
Something that Morgan Freeman did say, and I'm not, I'm going to leave
That's
him
all right.
in a second, was
Fine.
the fact that he used yawning as part of his vocal release and maybe not development, but he was referencing it as a way for people to find a freedom. Is that something that you agree with and use?
Well, yeah, yawning's really nice for releasing the constrictor muscles at the back of the pharynx, right? And it can create space. The larynx lowers as well. So I can understand why for him that is a really great thing to do. I do suggest people use yawns into sighs and yawns into creak as vocal resets and cool downs and things, because you do get that release and the kind of supraglottal tension and things. So I am an advocate for the yawn. On this occasion, I agree with Morgan.
When have you
And his lovely
disagreed?
voice. Well, no. I think his voice is very lovely.
Yes, but he gets a lot of praise for that, so we'll leave him there.
Well done, Morgan.
Yes, congratulations. For audio work, which is audio only, there's no video bit to help us out. How can we ensure that our voice is delivering on the mic and sounds as expressive in the playback as we intend it to be when we hit the record button?
That's a common one for, again, new podcasters and new voiceover artists, is this idea that when they listen back, they go, oh God, I didn't sound as passionate about that as I thought I was going to, or I thought my voice was more expressive than that. It's very common. And I think for me, there's two important things to think about. Number one, it's your warm up and your prep. Do you have a warm up that's releasing tension and making sure everything's free and the voice is working in an efficient way so you can get that expression? And then the second thing is completely untechnical, in the sense that we have to remember when we're on the microphone that it's not about our voice at all. It's about who we're trying to impact or how we're trying to make the person listening feel. So as communicators every day, we don't realize it, but every interaction we have is emotionally driven, right? You know, if I'm saying, "How are you?" to my mom, I'm saying it thinking, well, I want her to feel welcome. I want her to feel loved. I want her to feel embraced. You know, how are you? And my body will connect an emotional expression to that phrase because I honestly want that person to feel that way. And on the microphone, what happens is, holy crap, it's a big piece of metal in front of my face. Oh my God, I can hear myself coming right back in my ears. That's terrifying. Is that how I sound? And we start listening and monitoring to ourselves all the time. And it's a constant repeating cycle of like, hear yourself, was that okay? Hear myself, was that okay? And what we do is we forget we're talking to anyone at all. So what I tend to do is make sure people can warm up and prep their voice in a way that is efficient and useful so that when they're on the mic, they can forget about how they sound, forget about how they're trying to sound, and focus more on the impact they're trying to have. So I use actioning quite a lot, which is a acting technique. And it's this idea that instead of going, I need my voice to sound exciting, or I need my voice to sound loving, or I need my voice to sound rich, or whatever, you're actually going, I want them to feel X. So with everything you say, it's linked to you trying to have an emotional impact on somebody. So if I was saying, welcome to the Voice Coach podcast, the action I would use there is welcome. So I welcome you. And that would be the kind of subtext of welcome to the Voice Coach podcast. Or it could be, I embrace you. Welcome to the Voice Coach podcast. You know, it's all about understanding that you're trying to make somebody feel something. So you have to prep your voice to the point where it can go where you want it to go emotionally, and then remind yourself of what the emotion you're trying to elicit is. And ultimately, those two things together tend to really free people up so that they're not worrying about whether they sound expressive or whether they sound this, that, or the other. They're so focused on what they're trying to do, the message they're trying to send, and, you know, how they're trying to make people feel, that they have a lovely time. And the expression, you know, responds to that.
I listened to your podcast on warm-ups, and you reference your voice deck where you talk about body, breath, sound, and shapes.
Oh, yes.
Can you tell us about your
right?
warm-up? Oh, yeah. So are they like cards?
Yeah.
Deck of cards?
This was a silly 3 a.m. idea I had for anyone not watching but just listening. It's like it's the size of a normal deck of cards, but instead of it being kings and queens and whatnot or tarot cards, it's voice warm-ups. So I had this mad idea that, you know, I'd seen card decks for speech writing and positive affirmations, recipe cards, all this stuff. And I was like, oh my God, I should make one for warm-ups. Because my whole thing as a voice coach with anybody is, how can the warm-up be quick and easy, simple? How can you remember to do it? How can it be fun? How can it be like enlightening and life-giving? You know what I mean? So basically I created this, yeah, and it follows, look at that, a nice fan. I'm like a magician.
Yeah.
Well done me. Must be a brand new deck.
Love that.
So it's about, yeah, body, breath, sound, speech is the basic structure I go through. And that's like that's classic kind of voice technique stuff. You know, you free the body, you get the breath going, you work on the sound, and then you work on the articulation and the speech. So the idea is that you pick like one card from each section or two cards from each section. It's all color coded, and you mix it up, and then you've got a wee warm up. And funny enough, one of the things that I love about it that someone said after they'd used it was like, they really like that it's analog in the sense that it's a physical thing in their hand that they can use before they go online all day or before they go on the mic into technology land all day. They can warm up offline and with a physical thing rather than Googling warm-ups or listening to something. It's like a physical, tangible thing, and it sits on their desk in their booth. They see it, they remember they should warm up, and off they go. So yeah, that's the voice deck.
It looks great. And with that, is there a cool down counterpart as well, or is that on the radar? What are you thinking there?
There's not on that. There is a bit on cooldowns in the book, as if my memory serves me correctly. So my book on the mic actually is having a birthday this week. It's its 1st birthday
Happy
as we record.
birthday.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We're very proud.
Yeah.
And it's still too soon for anyone to tell me that they've found a spelling mistake in it. Okay? I just don't need to know.
I would feel physically sick if that were my book, because if you're anything like me, Nick, I would have gone through with a fine tooth comb. But it's always the thing that you've just missed it, and it's on the sixth read that you go, "How did I miss that?" But I
Yeah.
would feel physically sick if any. Do you remember way back when it was when teletext was still a thing,
Yeah.
and there was a mistake in I can't remember which Harry Potter book it was. There was a mistake that went all over teletext.
I've seen a lot of mistakes in the books that I've bought that have been published. I don't mind, but that's because I'm me and I'm not good at spelling any. Well, I am good at spelling, but I'm not as good at grammar as people seem to think is necessary for everyday life.
Yeah.
But it got proofread and copyread 1,000,000,000 times, so it should be all right. But it's still too soon. It's still
Yeah.
too soon.
You know what?
But
If anyone's listening who's read it, just don't say anything.
just don't say anything. I had my first negative review the other day, in the sense that someone gave me 2 stars. I was like, oh my god, here it is. Okay, it was coming. It was coming. But the reason they didn't like it and the reason they wanted to give it back was because they didn't like the typeface. It's actually printed in a font called Dyslexie, which is an accessible font for neurodivergent people.
Yeah.
And I was really proud of that, but this person was really sad and angry, very angry about it. Actually, who did
Right.
I think I was? Anyway, so
Yeah.
that's what my 2-star review was. Yay, that's okay. They didn't
Yeah.
even read it. They didn't
We'll
even read
take
it.
it. That,
We'll take it.
that's the thing. Can you really leave a 2-star review based on that?
I think it's really unfair. Actually, I reported it.
Well
I
done.
wanted to write back and say it's actually printed in Dyslexie font. So, by the way, how you feel now is how neurodivergent people feel with every single book in existence. So maybe you could have made the effort, like they have to, every single day. But whatever. Who am I? Who am I? Didn't even read it. There's a disclaimer at the front, so if he'd literally read the first page, he would have went, and that was it. Anyway, so no, we do talk about cooldowns in there, and I have an episode of the podcast on cooldowns, but you could definitely piece together the stuff in there into a little cooldown as well. So anything that releases tongue tension, jaw tension, anything that brings you from any heightened speaking place you might be in for whatever performance you're doing, back down into your kind of habitual speaking voice is really nice. So a bit of intoning and dropping down again into creak or yawns or stuff like that is quite good.
And for the teacher who is going to be in the lecture hall or in the studio all day, how would their warm up compare to when they get online to create a course, for example, or do a podcast?
I think if you're in person speaking to a room full of people, although all voice is like a full body experience, I think it's definitely pertinent to really think about the entire body. So checking in with your alignment from the ground up, making sure you're grounded and centered, making sure you're standing in a way that means you can release the belly on the in-breath so you can get that nice support on the voice on the way out. I would do a lot of shoulders and neck stuff as well, because if we're speaking to people in a big lecture hall or a space, even if you're mic'd, there's a lot more kind of shoulder neck action and a bit more of that. I think probably I'd also be inclined to play around a little bit more in the resonance places. So I'd be thinking about balancing nasal, oral, pharyngeal resonance to get a nice rounded quality and variety, but also to make space so you can get a bit more volume if you need it. On the mic, it's not as much of an important feature to need to be loud. So I think for that, I would be focusing on articulation. So releasing the articulators, toning the articulators, getting everything bouncing and moving around nicely.
What's one of your favorite things to do for that?
So I approach articulation with a 2-step sort of process. The first is release, so releasing tension and making space. And then the second is about response. So getting things bouncing to where they need to get to, to make the particular articulation content they need for whatever sound. So I love a bit of slug tongue. I don't know if you know this one. I can't remember which practitioner told me this first, because it's all derivative, isn't it? These days, there's so many remarkable people. I'm walking in the footsteps of giants in the job that I do. But you just let your tongue lie out on your lower lip, like a slug, And then you speak through days of the week, months of the year, and count 1 to 10. So you're like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Then you let your tongue come back in. What you end up with, well, there's a lot of saliva sometimes.
Dribble.
But a nice feeling of like release in the body of the tongue and also the root of the tongue. So you get a bit more space at the back of the throat, but you also get the tongue kind of released to move around a little more freely. So I love that one because it's ridiculous. And there's nothing like bringing that into like a corporate environment or an environment where they're like, I've never done voice before. And I'm like, yeah, I'm here. I've got a master's degree in this. Okay, just stick your tongue out for me.
One.
And they're like, what? You spend a lot of time going, well, I think you'll find actually the this muscle, that muscle. They like the anatomy. Like, why am I doing this? What is it helping me with? And I'm like, do you want muscle names or do you just want the practical elements? So yeah, I like the silly stuff. So that's a really nice one.
I'm just pressing the pause button on the podcast for a very brief moment to invite you to book your free BAST call. If you've been thinking about joining the BAST community through one of our courses, but you just don't know which option is the best for you, then why not book your free Zoom chat with our very own Kimberly George, who has all the answers. Head over to basttraining.com/book-a-call/ and click that big blue button. That's basttraining.com/book-a-call/. Now, where were we?
I once had a message from a friend. I posted something on my Instagram about the tongue, and I had a message saying, "You have a really fat tongue."
Oh, thank you.
I thought, oh, okay.
Isn't it funny what people think they can comment on? This is what gets me about voice. You know, I deal with people who have complexes about their speaking voice daily because of what other people have said about it, right? Even if they thought it was just an off-the-cuff thing. Like, what if you'd had a real complex about the size of your tongue all your life?
Well, now I'm thinking, how does it fit in my face?
I don't know how you. I don't know how you get
quite chunky.
Like, it's wide, but it's more. I think it's more that it doesn't go to a point.
That's true.
Some people's tongues go to a point, don't they?
It's quite.
Oh, that's another good tongue exercise. Can you do this one? So this one's called fat tongue, flat tongue. Or it's one of my clients called it sausage tongue, burger tongue at one point. And I learned this from Annie Morrison, I think. It goes like this. You stick your tongue right out, fat like a sausage. And then you let it go flat like a burger.
Oh, my tongue doesn't. No, I'm getting more taco burger.
Yeah. Well, we can move through all of the foods. It's quite a fun party trick. When we were doing that in the class, when I was training at Central, I couldn't do it. I was like, that's it. I must leave. I don't have the skills for this. This isn't going to work. But I did it every day. I just stood in front of the mirror. And it's one of those things that all of a sudden you just get like, I don't know why I can do it now.
Yeah.
But clearly I can. And it always baffles people. And they go away from classes going, oh, man, I'm going to work on that. And they come back and they can do it. But it's really good for working the muscles that go all different directions on the tongue.
Yeah. Well, I'll practice it and I'll come back to you in a year.
You must let me know, yeah. On the second birthday of the book.
Yes, absolutely.
When I will be ready for spelling mistake errors to be pointed out.
Give it time. Particularly when I'm working with male presenting voices, I can sometimes find myself speaking at a pitch a little bit too low for what is optimal for myself. What are the challenges that you have found of speaking either too high or too low for where is optimal for you? And how can we make sure that we are using our voice in a way that is dynamic, but is resonant and stays within, a good range for us to be narrating at?
Good question. So for me, it comes with the different styles of voiceover you're often asked to read. So one day I did an ad for something that definitely puts me in the old category now. It was mobility furniture for old people. Those chairs that move and beds that move and stuff. I was like, this is it. I'm now a middle-aged voiceover. Here we are. But they wanted They wanted something really soft and smooth and kind of just relaxing, that kind of vibe. Which isn't where I talk normally. I'm kind of here. So that was something that was ever so slightly lower. But then at the other end of the spectrum as a voiceover, you have those really high energy reads for those kinds of adverts, something like that. And again, that's not, I suppose, kind of more me, a certain emotion day to day. Like if I'm really excited about something, but it's still ever so slightly out of my vocal, like habitual range. And I think the main thing for me is always tension release. It's the same for, I work a lot with audiobook narrators and people who do video games, things like that. And the entire nature of their job is pushing their vocal comfort zone. For narrators, I mean, jeepers, narrators can be doing hundreds of different accents and voices and characters in some way. And gaming can be, hi, please can you give me, we just need to do 40 different versions of you being stabbed in the neck. Okay, go. And that is definitely not a habitual kind of vocal thing. So I think it's definitely about the secret for me is tension release from the entire body, but also from the vocal tract itself. So anything that releases the jaw, the tongue, the pharynx, to make space and make the ability to get lots of different tonal qualities and resonance variety, but also to release any bits of tension that may have gone in to get you to that place in the first instance.
Yeah. I guess it's the same as singing. We are looking at cross-genre, being able to create lots of different sounds, different styles, and then being able to reset and come back to our typical place.
Absolutely. And, a fella who I do a lot of stuff with, have done a lot of stuff with in the past, Dan Chalfin, he always says, even if you're I'm paraphrasing, so sorry if you're listening to this at some point and I get this wrong, Dan. But what I took from it is that, if you're an opera singer and you only sing opera and you never, ever practice your M1 or thick fold or whatever. I'm not a singer, but a singing teacher. But if you never practice the stuff that is not in that position, you're probably going to end up talking like this when you come off stage as well. I have definitely met opera singers at the later end of their life who have that kind of, yes, I'm an opera singer, darling, kind of tone. And it's all about exercising everything all of the time. So I may just use this as my standard voiceover voice. This is my classic kind of, happy, friendly, I'm here for you kind of voiceover voice. But when I'm warming up, I make sure I go all the way down, all the way up, and play with all the resonances to keep stretching and playing and making sure I have access to all the variety that's in there. It's the classic use it or lose it kind of situation, I think. So play, variety, exploring is key.
And for you, what's the sign of a healthy speaking voice?
Do you mean as a listener or as a speaker?
I think, as somebody who works with people in the corporate world, and you've worked with comedians and the Peloton crew as well, what do you train or help people find that's a healthy space? And is there anything that you deem to be unhelpful in somebody's voice that you might bring attention to?
It's a tough one because everybody's different. I think one sign of a voice that's not healthy is if there's absolutely no ability to change tonal quality or resonance quality or range. So the way people talk about vocal fry and lots of people having vocal fry, and that's fine. It doesn't bother me. It is what it is, and it's actually a quality. It just exists. But if you can only speak in fry and you can't get full chord closure, for example, you can't get out of it, then that's a sign that there's something going on that needs looked at, I think. Same with if somebody has a really kind of restricted range and they're not really finding too much variety. I'm just thinking about certain types of females who I've come across in business who have maybe been told to not speak or haven't been able to have their voice heard or spent their entire life being told they're too quiet or too high or whatever. You tend to sort of sit in one place and there's not much kind of variety at all. And that tends to say to me that there's something going on there that needs releasing or looking at. So in terms of that's unhealthy, that's what I would think is probably an unhealthy voice, a lack of ability to find range of some kind, being stuck.
Yeah. And how do you work with personality types then? So you mentioned there the businesswoman who may have experienced some pushback because potentially related to her gender in that environment, or somebody who has experienced their voice being shut down, or maybe people who've got imposter syndrome can sometimes feel like they aren't able to project, for example. How do you work with that?
I think this is the delicate balance between like coaching and therapy. I can facilitate the discovery and the exploration and the discussion. And sometimes it's about the other person going away and reflecting and thinking about other elements of work that they might need to do with me, supported by me, or with other people. It's just, it shows up in so many different ways that I don't think there's a way of saying how. As a coach, I always make sure people feel comfortable. And I think my skill as a coach, most people would say, is that I make people feel very welcome and seen and comfortable and settled and safe quite quickly. And that's maybe it's the Irish blarney. I don't know. People seem to settle into feeling like they're my friend quite quickly, which is nice. So I think it's about creating a space where they're welcome to discuss all of those things and go there and feel the feels. And then taking that and me directing them in a way where if they feel like they need to go somewhere else for a bit of extra support, they can. But similarly, if they don't want to and they want to just crack on with the technical stuff for now, then we do that. It's very client led, and I talk about females who are in that kind of high pitched, kind of quiet space. Similarly, I had a lady who had just retired from a really big corporate position, and she'd spent her entire life being very loud, speaking very low, because she was fronting up to all the men in the room, and she was struggling down at like her social space now at the golf course with her friends because they all said she was too loud. So she'd spent her entire life building her career and being incredibly successful, and then was finding herself without a place in her retired social circle because people didn't want to be around her because she was really loud. So there's just so many different ways stuff like that can show up, that I think the only thing I can do as a coach to work with them is hold space for it, allow whatever to come out, and give them the support they need, or direct them to the support they need, or the training and coaching they need from me, as and when it feels appropriate.
For teachers who are interested in using their voices in more ways, what's your advice about getting work like book narration or voiceover?
Yeah, the one thing I'd say at the moment with caution, I don't say it with caution, but I would say to them, proceed with caution in the sense that there's a big change going on in the recorded voice industry at the moment with AI. It's not that it's over and everything's terrible. It's that it's finding its feet and things are settling, and we're learning how AI is impacting the work that's available. And there's a big influx of people since COVID as well, getting into voiceover, audiobook narration, games, that kind of stuff. So, all of the performers who couldn't act for 3 years during COVID, rightly so, got a microphone and cracked on with that. So I think the first thing you have to do to give you a fighting chance is really get to know your voice well and play around with it, explore it, tune into what's happening in the industry right now. So listen to audiobooks, the ones that are coming out now. What is being cast? What kind of books are being recorded? Same with voiceover. What do you hear on the telly? What are you hearing on the radio? What trends are you hearing? And then play around and explore how your voice sits within that, because you have to show a unique vocal offering and work with what you've got. So going into it knowing that it's about your voice rather than trying to sound like somebody else. A great example of that is, I'm Northern Irish, I'm Irish. It used to be I got asked for things that sounded like Dervla Kirwan from M&S. That is not happening anymore, really. So it's understanding what's current and playing around and exploring, because the more you know your voice, the more you know what your unique selling point is and what you can offer to the industry. There's some great resources out there, like Gravy for the Brain. Gravy for the Brain is a great resource for voiceover. I coach voiceover as well. There's other places like Voiceover Network, VO Kickstart, the Voiceover Social Podcast. Just get to know the industry. It's not about, oh yeah, I'll just give it a go and like maybe it'll be fine. You just have to really understand what's going on and how you fit into that.
Regarding the equipment that we're going to need, people who might podcast or want to do an online course, what sort of things should they have in their setup?
Yeah, so the main thing to say about setting up a studio at home or for recording is it's actually more important to get the environment right than the equipment. So I can put the fanciest, most expensive microphone in the world in a terrible room and it'll make any voice sound terrible because it's about the acoustics. So it's understanding that you need a space with a lot of relatively soft furnishings. A lot of people start in their wardrobes, surrounded by hanging clothes, nice bit of carpet, a few pillows, that kind of a thing. I've got some acoustic curtains here, which are really useful for separating off an area if you're in a shared space or communal space. These are vocal booth to go curtains, I think, but any kind of acoustic blankets, moving blankets, anything that's thick and heavy is really good. I mean, I've had every iteration of studio going in the 20 years I've been doing this. At one point, I had a giant vintage suitcase with foam inside it. That was one way I did it. Another time, I literally commando crawled into a tiny room in my mum and dad's house in the attic and recorded lying down, would you believe? Good Lord, that was terrible. So soft space, as quiet as is humanly possible. And then the very basic tech, my setup was very basic. It's just a microphone into an interface into my computer. So a lot of people start with a Rode microphones of quite a good entry level. So Rode NT1A is quite a nice one. The Focusrite do some reasonably priced interfaces that will attach into your computer. And then a little bit of recording software. So Reaper, Audacity, they're both free. Twisted Wave, that's very easy and low cost. And I think the main thing again is don't overload yourself with tech before you know what you need. Like I could have the most fancy pants digital audio workstation to do my editing as a proper sound engineer, but I don't need to do any sound engineering. I'm the voice. And the sound engineer who's receiving my audio is way better at it than I am. So, understand what you need before you invest in the tech. Like, what are you selling? What are you going to have to record? And what editing are you going to have to do? And kind of match that with the equipment that you buy. Decent pair of headphones as well. So for most people, most headphones we listen to sort of just generally day to day with for podcasts or music or whatever are designed to clean things up and make the audio sound nice. So I've got my AirPods in here. They don't give me a true reflection of what's coming out. They kind of shine it off, make it sound nice, like depending on what's happening and what's playing. What you need is a pair of studio monitoring headphones. I'm holding up now my favorites at the moment, which are DT770s, because they just play what's going in. They don't dust it off or make it sound nice. They just give you the audio. So a decent pair of headphones or speakers that are monitoring rather than just for recreational audio is really useful too.
I saw quite a few friends in lockdown in their airing cupboards with bed sheets over their heads. And you know what?
Classic.
Maybe next episode I'll do it from my wardrobe and see what
how
happens.
It sounds. Yeah, it's mad. I had a old school room divider as well at one point behind me with like a quilt over it. There's all sorts of ways you can do it. You see it with voiceovers all the time when they're on holiday. When I'm on holiday, I have a holiday. I don't work. But sometimes you're away, if I'm away for work and it's not a holiday and a voiceover comes in, you tend to make a kind of pillow fort in the hotel cupboard.
I like the kind of self-creating bits though, because it just goes to show that you can still do it. It's then open to everybody, isn't it? And it's not just about those who have the affordability to buy all the fancy pants equipment.
Yeah, and some people will say that's a good thing. I certainly think it's great. Give it a go. If it's meant for you, it'll happen. There are an old school area of the voiceover community who are like absolutely livid that it's so easy to set up a studio now.
Yeah,
but that's the same with all industries, isn't it? That's the old guard, and yeah, they often have a lot of things to moan about.
What's your top tip for using the microphone optimally, particularly when we want to get rid of any like popping or like crackling or that horrific sticky mouth sound which you might be triggered by with misophonia, or you might absolutely adore if you love ASMR?
Yeah, I cannot be friends with you if that's where you get your kicks.
It's definitely not me.
So knowing what your microphone is and where, and the optimal positioning for it differs depending on the microphone. So make sure you know what microphone you've got, where the sweet spot is to start with. Mouth clicks, it's about hydration. There's no shortcutting it really. You can mention green apples and mouth sprays all you like, but your dentist isn't going to like you if you're chomping on green apples all day. So I'm a bit clicky today actually, because I've just realized, because I had a cup of tea just before I jumped on the mic, which is foolish. Not just because it's slightly more viscous than normal water, so it just makes the inside of my mouth a bit sticky. But so just making sure you're optimally hydrated is good. At least the day before you jump on the microphone, up your fluids, get everything nice and moist. That might
Can you say that right into the microphone and just say that word?
Moist. With plosives stuff, actually, I talk a lot about in my book on the mic about how you can do that at source. So you can play around with how you create the plosive sounds to make them less energetic and smoother and that kind of a thing. But there are a few little tricks, like just working ever so slightly off axis on the microphone is useful. Some people do the old finger trick where they hold a finger up in front of their mouth if they have a particularly plosive job to do. That's quite a good one. I once did a job where I had to say every single police station in the whole of the UK. Such glamour. That was such and such police, such and such police, such and such police for like 4 hours. That's a lot of P's. So I did do a little bit of holding my finger up in front of my mouth. If you hold your finger up or a pencil up sort of halfway between you and the microphone, it kind of disperses the energy, the sort of sound waves before it hits the mic. So that can help. But I'm not a fan of quick fixes. I'm a fan of going, why am I poppy? What's going on? And working it out that way. But knowing your microphone is the key, really.
Yeah, sure. And yours has got a little furry hat on.
Yeah.
Is that what's that for? Is that a necessity, or like I've got a one of the arms with the circular?
Yeah.
I don't know what they're called, obviously.
They're different versions of pop shields, really. This foamy one is more like a wind sock type situation, I suppose. It's just a different version of a pop shield, so it just protects and creates, again, a barrier between you and the diaphragm inside the microphone that will receive the sound waves. So it gives you just a little chance to something to get in the way to disperse the sound waves, to release the pop. But again, depending on the microphone, your environment and your voice will depend on the mic, the pop screen that you have. I have one of those other ones as well, but I just don't like it that much, so don't use it.
Fair enough.
And I always go with, no one's moaning about my audio quality, so I'm not going to change anything just because somebody on Instagram has one.
Get you. Yeah, don't fix it if it ain't broke.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you tell us more about your podcasts and your online communities that we can get involved with?
Yeah, of course. So my podcast is called The Voice Coach Podcast, and that is just short episodes taking you through how I train voice. So it's a lot of FAQs as well. So the questions that people come to me with all the time, like how do I deal with nerves? What do I do when I've got a cold? How do I reduce sibilance? All that kind of stuff. There's also the Voiceover Social podcast, which I created with a colleague, Leah Marks, but we've now handed that over to somebody else. And that's a great back catalogue of episodes all about the voiceover industry. My online community is called On Mic Voice Coaching, and that's on Facebook. It's a Facebook group. It's almost 6,000 people in there now. And that's just loads of voice crack, questions, answers, articles, podcast episodes, banter. Just a nice community.
Amazing. So what's the website that we can visit for that?
The best thing is probably to go to my website, which is Nic Redman. Actually, go to onthemicbook.com and that'll take you to my website. onthemicbook.com. That'll take you to my website and you can find everything from there.
Amazing. Well, Nic Redman, thank you so much for keeping me company today.
Thank you for having me.
do, do, do.